Oh wait, what is that? What are you drinking?
It's like just a regular ass Budweiser.
Womp. I'm gonna grow these videos up while we're waiting. An all-American beer. I
Um,
like your style. That's good.
so GFTL had asked, comparing the U.S. to Soviet Union in circa '91, and yeah, I don't think that's a terrible comparison, honestly. I actually know some former Soviet citizens who made a joke very much like that, like about a couple weeks into the current quarantine situation, and that there was a lot of weird things that were happening that reminded them of that period. Um, Also, if you ever watch like films from the end of the Soviet, like not even just the end, like from the late '70s on in the Soviet Union, like I think always of Tarkovsky's Stalker as being one of the best of these. It is about uh, it is about the sort of grinding to a halt of and the sort of like crumbling of a certain kind of dream and like what that it means for that to be lost. And also eerily, it feels like it is a documentary about the United States in the 21st century, as opposed to a science fiction film about the Soviet Union in the 20th.
I actually just recently rewatched Stalker, and I was taken by it's like a really, really strong, stark decision between either giving up this unattainable dream and happiness in turn, and accepting that this thing is a myth, or like
Yeah.
going insane trying to find that thing. And I hadn't considered that juxtaposed to my home country. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm gonna chew on that.
No, I think it's really really good. That comparison that GFTL put out there.
Yeah.
The other thing that Pat had said before that I wanted to pick up on is literally state capacity questions, which is like, and this is a joke that we had made on one of the BISR live, the Brooklyn Institute for Social Research live streams that we've been doing, was like, the U.S. has the capacity, right, to do this stupid video game, literally, right, make the stupid video game. We have the capacity, although I'm sure it's internationally produced, actually, but whatever. We have the capacity to do the things that are in this game, right, to put like a drone anywhere in the world in 20 minutes. But we do not have either the capacity or the desire, and I would proffer that it is both, to like make a ventilator or a bunch of surgical masks and get them where they gotta get.
Yeah.
And that is wild. And that's what state capacity I think means in a moment like this. And I know that last week's stream we mentioned Gilmore's what's it called, Golden Gulag, but we really did replace our welfare capacities with prisons and with military capacity.
I mean, I didn't get into this in the stream we did where it was going into the Brazil one, because like I wound up like getting stuck defending Burger Town.
What a good
But
day.
like, so was like Burger Town must be defended. But like, the theorist Paul Amar has this interesting thesis that Jay, maybe you're familiar. Are you familiar with this like stuff about like austerity and policing or whatever? Where it's like,
no, go ahead.
yeah, so it's Paul Amar. I'll link to his stuff in here, but like he's a political theorist and a very interesting like gender and stuff too. But his whole thing is using a bunch of example states, and he relies mainly on India and Brazil and a couple other of these places. But essentially, they're places where
Those are two cases. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, essentially he's like he has his own rubric of criteria, which I'm not gonna recall off the top of my head, but it's like high inequality, a certain crisis of faith in various institutions, but and then climate change related sort of disruptions and violence.
Oh yeah.
And he has this interesting thing where he notes that in a lot of these societies, and of course this applies to the U.S., this is where we're going with it, the police militarize. Like the police get all like punished up, and they get more and more geared, more and more aggressive. They get more and more about like doing like anti-guerrilla warfare, counterinsurgency stuff at home, while simultaneously the military gets more and more invested in operations of like climate change mitigation and disaster relief.
Yes, that's absolutely true.
Tyrannises, whereas the police militarize, which is a weird. I mean, obviously they're both brutal, repressive institutions, but like it's interesting. Like, it's very hard to see that as cashing out here too.
I will say this about one thing that has been fascinating to me, and something I'm looking to, like, we're going to be doing some programs on like militarism and imperialism coming up for Brooklyn Institute. But one of the things that I do find fascinating is that literally no one, I think, has called. Maybe one of the presidential candidates did, but it really is in the background. Like there is very little call for like bringing American soldiers onto American soil to do like sort of. The kind of like mitigation work that you were just talking about.
Yeah.
And there are some interesting bits of that. But part of it, when you're saying, oh, they're both brutal institutions, yes, but let's say from your non-commissioned officers on down, it is a very different set of people
Yes.
who are populating the military than are populating the police force, which is essentially a like decent like middle class or even upwardly mobile job is the police force. Whereas to be an enlisted person or to be a non-commissioned officer is not exactly like you're a working class person essentially, and it's one of the only paths for a lot of super poor people, and it ends up being a really interesting political mix of there is like. I know I've read very good stuff on this. Of like, there's definitely like elements of far right proselytization within American military forces, but also like far left ideas are very popular amongst a lot of like enlisted people and things like that. And I think there is like fear. There was a wonderful video. I don't know if people got a chance to see this. It was totally not manipulated, but it was like misrepresented in the press, where like the guy who was the whistleblower on that Navy ship.
Yes.
Right? Like, so he's like, hey, we have coronavirus, and he got sacked by the brass. People blamed it on Trump, but it was almost certainly he was sacked by an admiral or two. And his ship like did this bizarre like standing O, cheering, shouting, chanting his name thing. And I think a lot of people don't know that much about like military rules and stuff like that. You could be like executed for that kind of thing. Like that is like a mass demonstration of insubordination. And I think there's a lot of fear. Yeah, Gratz is literally treason. Like, I think that, like, right now, there are elements in our own state that fear the military and do not want they want the American military in Kyrgyzstan or whatever the fuck we're fighting in right now. Not in
Kyrgyzstan, yes.
What'd you say, man?
I think it's like Urkelstan or Urzikstan or
Urzikstan. Yeah, they want anywhere but here because like the idea of there being a potentially uncontrollable military force here is very frightening. I think in moments like this. No, that's like that actually brings us very neatly to what we're about to do, right? Which is like Warzone, right? And I wanted to like we really things we like to say last time around, like the audio this time is gonna be much better. But like this is like the new. I'm gonna speak to just like the audience. Oh, I will say also there are a bunch of vets against the wars who are in and out of this viewership. Oh, absolutely.
Which is kind of awesome, and like we all see you and we appreciate your presence.
Yes, please.
And hopefully, I've got some friends who are vets who are hopefully going to be on to play with us, and like I think that's going to be like there's a whole thing that I think we're going to follow in terms of like the way in which this game specifically is a recruiting device, because it really is. But like, so yeah, the new mode that we're going to play now, which some people in the stream will not have seen before, is Warzone, right? And this is the Battle Royale mode, and it's using the Call of Duty engine and the setting. So we've already established that the setting of this game is in like a ambiguous space that's a little bit Russian and a little bit like. There's no way to say this that doesn't sound terrible, like Muslim-ish, right? Like all the bad. What would you say this is set, Ajay? Like I'm struggling on that.
It's Islam. It's Islam-esque. Like I said, it's some weird stitch of like Syria on Afghanistan, but with all of like all the proper nouns have been removed. And all the reference points essentially have been removed. So you will not, for example, see a mosque here. But somehow, like in the main game, for example, this really annoyed me in the main game. You will see like guys who are clearly meant to be Iraqi or Syrian, but wearing a Central Asian sort of turban or headgear. And I'm just like, they're just using these signs and signals to sort of be like, it's Muslim-ish. What was that movie by the asshole Sacha Baron Cohen?
Borat.
Yeah, but Borat, right? Nothing in Borat, right? There's even some fake religion in Borat, right? But like nothing in Borat is actually like about Islam. But actually, Borat's all about like Central Asian, Middle Eastern countries and like how they're like uncivilized and should be invaded. I mean, there's a little bit of self-reflexivity in there, I think, but not much.
I mean, like, so yeah, it's a pastiche, right? Like, I remember thinking about, like, the first time, like, I keep going back to, like, my own experience, because I grew up playing so much of this game, right? It's like,
not Ukraine is the other space. Sorry, one of your chat people was asking. The other space is like, it's Muslim-ish and Eastern European-ish, yeah. And I think that reflected the weird obsession with Russia that was going on, or that is still going on, I guess.
Yeah, it's like the flags have both like scimitars, but also they're red, right? Like there's a weird like it's like a Bathism of the imagination, kind of, but like it's very
yeah. That's right. Muslim-esque, Muslim-ish.
I got this like for me like a formative like experience looking back on it was watching the Rambo movie. Is it Rambo 2 where he goes back to Vietnam? Do you remember this one?
Yes.
Dan, have you seen this one?
Is that
it's like,
2 or 3? I think I have seen it, but I hate those movies. I hate those movies so much.
Like that for me, like actually by my t-shirt, John.
Yeah,
following you to wherever. We'll explain what Warzone is as we go along. But like for me, like I had a film teacher in high school who was an old school Vietnam era radical named John Lewis. He was a crusty, wonderful person. May he rest in peace. He was really good. But he paired Rambo 2 with Hearts and Minds, the documentary against the war, which is kind of amazing. But like in Rambo 2, like that's the one where Rambo goes back to Vietnam, and like because there are still POWs, like the POW MIA flag is like the plot of the movie. Like two things are established right from the get-go. One, Rambo is half Native American, half German, right? Which is like, okay, like
I don't remember that at all.
Warrior races?
Yeah, like isn't that weird? Like that's an interesting, like, okay, so he's like, is he and not just Native American German, he's like half Apache, half like Austrian or something, right? And
it's like he's like the true native. This is like some Heideggerian nonsense.
Yeah, he's like he has like great bloodlines and an amazing body, and like it's like okay, so like he's like both Apache warrior but also like Aryan. It's a very bad. It's not a good one, right? But then the other thing is that like we start seeing the Vietnamese like Viet Cong whatever, and also they're Russian, and the two things that are immediately like if you look for it, you immediately see it, right? First off, like the Russians are all blonde and blue-eyed, but they're not like particularly Slavic looking. Like they're in that, and they all wear gray outfits, so they're like. Because obviously the Russians are behind the Vietnamese things, right? It's that Cold War fantasy. They all look like Nazis from World War II movies. They don't look like actual Russians, right? But then the other thing,
which is the same thing as Rocky IV, Dolph Lundgren, right?
Drago or whatever, right? Like it's, and then the other thing is that all these Vietnamese actors, or all people playing Viet Cong, are not actually Vietnamese or even Asian. They're literally a lot of them are like Mexican.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, you got they're all like Mexican extras. Like literally, there's John read at some of these like director cuts notes where it's like, yeah, we just hired some day laborers and put them in DC uniforms. So they're basically just like they're brown people done up in like not very good makeup to make them look like a caricature Fu Manchu Asian, right? And then the movie itself is very reactionary. But what the takeaway from that for me was like, oh. This movie about like American violence or American patriotism or like cool American like badasses can just completely recycle these old tropes of bad guys, but also just play on the racist imaginary to produce these others that are totally fungible, right? Where all the Vietnamese are Filipinos and all the Russians are Nazis, you know? And I think that's what's going on here.
Yeah, that's great.
Like that's like what this is. Right?
Do you ever see Delta Force?
Oh my god! I love that movie.
So Delta Force, you know the funny thing about Delta Force though, about the very similar to what you were just talking about in terms of Rambo.
Here, Ajay, come over here and crouch on this car while you talk.
Michael.
Where are we?
Just hop on top of this car and crouch on it, and Pat, you hop on the back, and just keep talking.
Yeah.
But I'll find us the next thing.
Here, Jay, you
Okay.
jump on top of the area. Okay, we're good. All three of us here. Nice. Dan, you're amazing.
All right. Yep. Keep going. Sorry, interrupted.
No, yes.
Okay, let's get this one.
There you go.
All right, on it. I'll get there.
I know, like, I'm making this boring, but this is
No,
actually
not at
how
all.
you
This is
win
interesting. Yeah.
This is wonderful. I like this. No, this is great.
We look so good.
So Delta Force. Anyway, I won't go into all the Delta Force Chuck Norris movie. It's terrible.
It's so
all the Palestinians I'm not even sure are named as Palestinians, but they are clearly meant to be Palestinians. Are in fact Israelis, which I just think is very, very funny.
Really?
Yeah, it's shot in Haifa.
Guys, we're leveling up. I got a truck. Hop in the bed.
Here, there's a kill streak if you want to get this. That's crazy. I have there's a A10 Warthog here streak if you want it.
Oh, yes, please.
So, Pat, this actually comes back to non-topic. So I'm running towards the objective. I know you guys are going somewhere else, I think.
No, we're just
Wait,
hanging out.
Pat, hop in.
Okay. Anyway.
You're right here.
Yeah, when you're just talking about like with the fungibility of who is the person to kill, you know, like last week we like asked that like there was like why is this mode more ideology and the other mode like fails as ideology in some ways?
Yeah.
Like this mode really I think plays on that stuff. The other one has a little bit of that as well. But right, like there is a little bit here of this like as a phrase a word I wanted to use, which I only recently discovered actually as a very old lineage in Someone's Dead.
Yeah.
I'm reviving myself. Don't worry about me.
Okay, cool.
Right.
You hop in.
Like in this mode of the game, it's always hinterland, right? We're always in this like weird, like just outside of a city,
Yes.
like, and apparently I didn't know this, but this used to be the double of like Center and Metropole. But it was used interchangeably in like I don't know 100 years ago, and
Really?
in like a lot of theory and anthropology and many subjects. Anyway, so like right here is like a real attempt to like play into an unconscious like structure in my mind that says like conflicts are good here, or like conflicts are okay here. The enemies are fungible. Blah 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 blah. In the actual campaign of this, it is so obsessed with like a version of the U.S. being good, right? Like, but it also cannot square that because it in fact is impossible to square this. It cannot square that with the reality of like conflicts like the Syrian conflict. So it comes up with this like hilarious list of like telling you exactly who's good and who's bad, and like your guy goes like against orders at times, and it's just like absolutely over the top and trying to project this exact message that actually does not work as an ideological object. And this is what I was saying. I think no one could hear on the stream last week. Like when something is recognizable as like a propagandistic object, where it is just communicating like an exact message, like, oh no, those people are bad, but not that one. Her brother is bad, but she's good. Like at that level of like detail and didacticism, or whatever, I made that word up. Like it's no longer operating on an ideological plane. It's really operating on a sort of, or if it's operating on one, it's no longer unconscious. It's operating on a positive ideological frame, which isn't really the way in which people talk about ideology, which is this sort of like, right, these unconscious or submerged or common sense structures for how we understand the world, that dictate how we understand the world, even beyond, or even including the way in which we might engage with it empirically. Sorry, I had to get that definition in there because it was asked before.
So propaganda is like the propaganda is stuff that you don't like. We think propaganda, like this again, one of those terms where it's like it's given to you when you're young, and you just assume that it means something given, right? Propaganda is like it's a crazy like poster in black and white, or it's like people goose stepping, or it's like North Koreans
If you want a really good book on this, I mean, in addition to all the classics, but actually on propaganda in itself, or like how to understand propaganda and how it can work even though it is so didactic is actually ironically a book about Syria, but long before the revolution and long before the Civil War, which is Lisa Wadeen's, what is it called? Ambiguities of Domination? Something like that?
Yeah,
yeah. I can't remember the name of the book, but if you look her up, you'll find her.
I'm looking here.
I need to. Oh, I can self-revive. But yeah, like in that book, she talks about how like all these people in a place like Assadist Syria, like know that it's all a big lie. Right? Like it's a big joke. Everyone laughs when they're like, "Oh, Hafez al-Assad invented the airplane." Like, but it still actually functions in a certain way.
Yeah.
But that's really different than like when we are watching. I mean, the kind of movies we were just talking about. I mean, I'll use Rocky IV. Like really is so has this wonderful ideological structure that actually is not as straightforward maybe as the Rambo one at first glance, because it actually exhibits a lot of pathologies that the U.S. thought about itself in the 1970s. That bled over to a certain extent into the 1980s, which is that the U.S. had become kind of like soft and weak and unable to withstand challenge from the Soviets or from the East. And right, like, so he goes and like gets rid of all of his Hollywood shit and like becomes does like Soviet training and Russian training to like become in touch with being a good, powerful person, right? This is not like, propaganda. This works on an ideological level because it's actually about a set of fears and a set of ideas about how the world works. Sorry, what's going on?
He like lifts logs and shit, right? Like he like goes hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, what's his name? Apollo is punished both for being black, right? James Brown performs at the beginning, but also for being consumerist. There's a weird critique of like a right-wing critique of consumerism that comes through in that film. That's not consumerism because like it's wrong because it's something with capital. I mean, critiques of consumption are always kind of weird, but it is in fact consumerism makes people soft. And unable to withstand the foreign threat.
I mean,
Yeah. Look at us now.
it's true though.